Here we go. All right. So thanks everyone again for joining our deep dive series. This is our first in probably a couple weeks now, since the last two were focused on advanced reporting. All of these deep dive webcasts are posted on the community site, on the Cloud Service Management community. The PowerPoint presentation as well as the actual webcast recording that we're doing will be posted there. So I certainly encourage everyone to go back and see the ones you missed. The goal is really to educate customers on existing features, answer any questions, and spend an hour deep diving into a particular feature, integration, or use case each session. My name is Rich Graves. I'm on the product management team at CA. We have several other product managers on the line, including Prasanna and Sandeep, who are here to help answer questions, as well as our sort of featured speaker for the week is Peter. Peter is on our CA services team, and his focus is on helping customers with implementations, and he has a lot of experience with our CSM to Unified Infrastructure Manager integration, and he will walk through that today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask via the WebEx Q&A, and we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the call. So Peter, I will hand it over to you, so go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Rich. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to have our deep dive series about CA UAM, CA CSM integration. So I will have it over the integration, and I will also talk about the implementation scenarios, because it can be the case that we have different scenarios to do the implementation depending on which one was first. And of course, we will have, of course, a demonstration on how to set up the integration between UAM and CSM, and as last but not least, question and answers, as Rich already told you. If you should have an answer, don't hesitate to do it in the Q&A window or when we are having a small break. So, UAM CSM integration is only a matter of deploying the NSD gateway probe in UAM. For those who don't know this, the NSD stands for Nimsoft Service Desk, which was the old name of CSM and also the old products. But this probe is still there. It can still be used to make a connection to the cloud version of Cloud Service Management without a problem and without too much effort. It's just a matter of deploying the probe, create a couple of users, configure the offline management, and in the end, configure the probe. And as the last step, we might need, depending on the situation and depending on the requirements of the customer, we might need to configure an auto operator. So, deployment of the NSD gateway probe, it can be done in two tools, either in the infrastructure manager or in the administration console. However, there's one side note to make. You can deploy the probe without a problem in the admin console, but for all the configuration, you are forced to use the infrastructure manager, because currently the probe is not capable of being configured with the admin console. So, in Infrastructure Manager, drag and drop the probe from the archive onto the hub where the NAS probe is also deployed. That last part, the NAS probe, is important, because if you try to deploy it to another robot or a hub and the NAS probe should not be present, then you will end up in problems. So, first step is to create a CAM user. That's been done in Infrastructure Manager. We add a user, we set the password, and it is used for assigning alarms. In URM, when we assign an alarm to a user, it is the NSD gateway probe who picks it up and then in the end calls a web service call in CSM to create the ticket or to update the ticket or to close the ticket, depending on the action which has been performed on the alarm. Same thing, we need a CSM user to be able to do the communication between URM and CSM. We can use the built-in RES Connect user, which is always defined with a license type of web services, because that is the only condition for the user. It has to be a license type web service. If you try to do it with another license type, then it will fail. So most of the time, in implementation, I'm using the out-of-the-box VS Connect user, and the only thing I need to do to be able to use that user is reset its passwords, so that I know it and I can supply it in the configuration of the NSD Gateway Probe itself. Configuration of offline management, that's needed to be done. It can be done in the RAW configuration section of Infrastructure Manager or the admin console. I'm coming back to that during the demonstration because there is a difference between the RAW configure and configure. The reason why we need to set up offline management is that it can be, although we have pretty good standards for the availability of our data center where CSM is hosted, it can be that due to a disconnect in the network that there is all of a sudden no longer a connection with the instance or the slice from CSM. When that happens, then the NSD Gateway Probe starts putting all the data onto the disk, and the moment it notices that CSM is back up and running and can be accessed, then it will start pushing all the information which has been stored onto the disk to CSM. When we are using RAW configure, do not forget to restart the probe, because if you use the configuration normally, then it will ask you to restart the probe the moment you change a value of the configuration. If you are using RAW configure, it will not ask it, and you have to restart the probe yourself. So, configuration of the probe. We have to set up the NAS address so that the NSD gateway knows where to find the Nimsoft alarm server on the Nimbus. Then we have to supply the server URL and how to connect to the CSM instance. We have to supply the username and the passwords. And as you can see, there is a test button to test the credentials and, of course, the URL. Be aware that the URL might differ from environment to environment. For this demonstration and for this deep dive series, I'm using a trial instance. So you have to be aware that the SM2T is standing for the trial slices, which are hosted in the EMEA data center. Next, we have the assigned user, which is the URM user. That's only on the part of URM. It has nothing to do with CSM. Then we have the requester name, and we have to be a little bit cautious here, because you can see it is being noted as last name, first name. So you have to put it in that exact same order with a comma and with a space. Otherwise, it's the NSD Gateway Probe will never find the correct user in CSM. Next, we have the requester organization, which is a company which manufactures everything in this case, and a time zone. Be aware that the time zone of URM and CSM need to be exactly the same, otherwise you might end up in very weird calculations regarding the SLAs due to the difference in the time zone. We can also set or choose what to do when we acknowledge an alarm. So if you acknowledge an alarm, then the ticket status should be moved to closed. We can also set the interval on how many times the NSD Gateway Probe should check in CSM if there are incidents closed. And then we have the incident custom fields. When we assign an alarm to the user in URM, or we create a ticket automatically in CSM, then we are given back a ticket ID number, and that ticket ID or incident ID number is being stored in the custom one fields. Of course, you can choose any of the other custom fields to store this information in, but by default it will be custom one. Next, when an alarm is cleared, we have the option to either move the ticket to closed or move the ticket to resolved, depending, of course, on the requirements of the customer. And next, we have the alarm severity and SLA. So basically, this is the mapping for the ticket severity and the alarm severity. So that we can make a mapping between informational and informational, and what to do with the clear alarm, because the clear status is a status which is unknown for CSM, so then it is a normal one. Next, we have the field mapping. By default, the specific fields used for the alarms have been added in CSM, and they are also present in the NFV gateway out of the box without doing anything at all. In order to be able to see all the service desk fields, a successful connection is needed with CSM. And the easiest way to do this is just go to the configuration window, give the URL, give the username, give the password, and click the test button. If the test returns green as successful, and then you move to the fields mapping, then you will see in the drop-down list of the service desk field all the available fields coming from CSM. And that includes also custom fields and fields which have been added afterwards. As you can see, you can also set a default value. That can be very handy to make some sort of categorization without doing much, just a matter of setting the default value. And of course, we have to make a mapping with the alarm fields itself. Next, we have the workload entry. So upon each alarm, when a new alarm arrives and UAM has decided that this is not a new alarm, but it is the same alarm coming from the same server, then it will automatically increase the counter on UAM side. When that happens, then a workload update is being created in the ticket in CSM, and the alarm fields, currently the severity and suppression counts will be mentioned in the workload. And that suppression count is being used in order to prevent to create new alarms from the same server over and over again. UM is not doing that. It will just increase the suppression count the moment it sees that the alarm is coming from the same server and all the conditions are equal, then it will just increase the counts. This, of course, prevents the creation of new tickets, and it will just create a workload entry in the ticket itself with, hey, I have a new alarm coming from that server. My count is now, instead of 1, my count is now 2, for instance. And as you can see, you can select more fields to be mentioned in the workload, but most of the time I do not select them all because the severity and suppression count is already enough to have an indication what is going on with that alarm. And then the optional steps. Let's go back 2 slides now. We can auto-assign alarms by using filters. As you can see, out of the box, this is not enabled. It will just use no filter, and it will assign all the alarms which are coming in, and it will create tickets for all the alarms. However, if the customer decides that it wants to do only the minor, major, and critical alarms, so for those 3 severities, the customer wants to create a ticket, then we are forced to use the NAS auto-operator function, because with the alarm filters, we can only set 1 condition. So if we say that severity is minor, then all other severities will not be pushed. So our customer will not be happy because he requested minor, major, and critical alarms should be pushed to CSM to create a ticket. But this cannot be done with the NFV gateway, and therefore we have an auto operator created. So basically, it is an action type of assign. We assign it to the VS Connect user or whatever user we have created in UAM, and the action mode, the moment the message arrives, we want to send it over to CSM for processing. And as you can see in the matching criteria, I have a whole selection of setting what alarms should be sent over or should be assigned to that user, and thus create a ticket in CSM. And as you can see, I forgot one to mention. I forgot to close the minor one, so in this case it will be only the major and the critical alarms which will be pushed over to CSM. But of course, for the matching criteria, you can use whatever of the fields available here. It can be the host name, it can be the domain name, it can be URM-specific hub names, robot names, probe names, and so on. Or I can even use the message counter if I see that all of a sudden I have a message counter which is with a very huge value, then I can create a new auto-operator profile and have that treated on a different way. So, CSM scenarios. 2 are mentioned, URM already implemented. This is the most difficult scenario of all because the URM origin should map to the CSM organizations. If URM has already been used for several times by the customer, then it can be that those origins have no mapping at all with the CSM organizations. And then then there are 2 solutions. Either we start reworking URM, which might be a challenge because it's quite difficult to tell how many times that origin is being used in URM. The other way around is that we use the features in CSM, such as the auto routes or the new process workflows, to set up the mapping between the origins and the organizations. Also, be aware that there are limitations in the organization name on the URM side. Letters with an accent in are not possible to be used as an organization name. So be aware of that. If you should have organization name with an accent letter in it, then you might have an issue on the URM side because you will never receive the tickets for that organization. If URM is not yet implemented, that's the easiest solution of all. So then we have just CSM and we have just to install URM and set up the NFV gateway because the origins are not yet set, and that makes it easier to define the origins and the organization and create a mapping between the 2. So an origin must map to an existing organization when we are using the $alarm.origin as a requester organization. That is being used most of the time by MSPs when we are having an URM installation or implementation which is being used to monitor different customers. And each of the customers, of course, want to see only his tickets. Then we are using the famous alarm.origin as a requester organization. So before I continue with the demonstration, any questions?
Yeah, Peter, there were some questions in the Q&A here as well. One of the questions was, you talked about the auto operator, and while creating that auto operator, what should be the assigned user that you configure?
That would be the URM user. Because it is configured in URM, so everything relates to CSM, you can basically ignore it for the time. The CSM user is only needed to configure the probe itself.
Got it. Thank you. I don't see any other open questions here right now. I think we are okay to proceed.
Okay, so let's go over to the demonstration. So this is the infrastructure manager, and here we have the admin console. Let's start with Let's start with the admin console to deploy the probe. I can do it in the infrastructure manager also, but let's use both of them so that you have exposure to both of the tools. Unfortunately, the admin console is not the fastest one in the world. So this is our main hub, as indicated with the blue icon. And if I scroll down in the list of probes, you will not see the NSD gateway probe mentions because it has not been deployed. The CS Service Desk Gateway has been deployed but not configured. So the first step is to go to our archive. Then we have to find brilliant. So then we didn't change. Since it's not longer possible to deploy the prop even with admin console, so I have to rely on doing it with the infrastructure manager. So first step is to navigate to the archive which contains all the probes. And then we have to scroll down into the list to find the NSD gateway probe, which is still called the Nimsoft Service Desk Gateway. And then it's just a matter of drag and drop it to the correct server where unless it's installed. Then you have to wait a few seconds until it has pushed all the files to that server. And if we navigate to the server, we will directly see that we now have the NSD gateway probe already up and running. If you double click it, it will open the configuration window. That's one way of opening it. The other way, right click and select configure, or use the shortcut Ctrl+Z. So first we have to set up the NAS address, which is the domain, the hub, the subsystem, and then the system, and then the NAS. So in our case, that would be domain, hub, and then the robot name. Next, we have to supply the server URL. Be aware that the server URL is being used at while instance, so we have to be a little bit careful. And also, it has to be Nimsoft Service Desk with capital letters and ending with Service Desk. Next, our user. And our password. And the first thing I do always is we click our test button to see if we have a proper connection with the Service Desk. It turns green, and immediately you see if this step is okay, then it will pull out the request name because you have specified that you will be using the ES Connect user, and it is able to use that to retrieve the first name and last name for that user. So our assigned user should already be there. That's our CSM user. It has been set a password. So our organization, GMT, what we want to do on diagnose on ticket status, and the check interval by default 30 minutes. We'll leave it like that. And here we set the incident ID field will be used in custom 1. And on the cleared alarm, I want to move the ticket to close. In the field mapping list, you now have all the fields coming from CSM, including custom fields. So the more fields you have, and it can be a little bit of a challenge to search in this list because it is not sorted alphabetically. But those are the mappings by default. And of course, we can add new mappings between alarm fields and service desk fields and add them to the list of the mappings. workflow entry, and we can even indicate if a workflow entry should be timed viewable. Most of the time, and suppression count should not be viewable by the customer because it's just a matter of updating the account. And next we have the alarm filters. And as stated earlier, I can do the matching criteria, but I don't have the selection of selecting multiple. So it is a one-shot. It is either minor or everything, which is the reason why I prefer to use a NES auto operator so that I have more possibilities. However, there's one drawback on using the NES auto operator, which is in terms of performance. If you're using a NES auto profile, you have to be aware that it can be quite a bit of load on the Nimsoft alarm server due to the profile which is being used. Next, we click apply. And as stated earlier, the moment I'm using the configuration and I click apply, then it will ask to restart the probe. So we just let the probe restart. And then be a little bit patient. Okay, we have a new PLE, so we're fine. Currently, I have 5 alarms, and that's fine. So let's create a new one. And the easiest way for me to do this is just activate my Oracle monitoring, because I know that will trigger at least 10 alarms. But I can also do it manually, should there not be a direct profile created, by assigning it to the CSM user. If I do that, then you see that the icon has changed in the beginning to indicate that it has been assigned. And now I have a custom fields, and in the background you can already see the result of the Oracle probe, which is starting it because it's creating lots of alarms, which was done on purpose for this demonstration, of course. And in the alarm details, I can already see that I have a new ticket created with this ticket ID number. So if we now go to CSM, and we log itself in. We go to our ticket center. And there you can see the alarm which has already been assigned, because I did the manual assignment, and here is the alarm, including all the details which have been defined. So in the details I can see my subsystem ID, the host from where it is going, the host name, the timestamp, and the message ID from URM, with the usual information. And in the additional information, you can see all the related alarm details, and which is, of course, a one-to-one mapping with whatever we find in URM. So let's accept it. And let's close the tickets. So now we turn to the NES auto operator, because I still have to do all the assignments manually, which is not the way I want it to be. And on the auto operate tab, we have the CSM ticket assignments, which is the action type assign, and we assign it to the CSM user. And in the drop-down, you will only see URM users here. Be aware there is also something in URM called UMP users, but that's something completely different and is not related to this one. Next, I set which are the severity levels for which I want to see new alarms coming in and for which I want to create the tickets. I can even set it for the operating periods so that only alarms which are generating during office hours will be pushed to CSM to create tickets. Never encountered that before. And next we have to, of course, activate it. Be a little bit patient. Come on. I'm going to wait for that.
And Peter, one question that came up, I'm hoping you can show in CSM, if a alarm is sent to CSM multiple times, how does the user know that if that suppression is working as configured?
That was the next thing I was going to demonstrate.
Okay, excellent.
But first I want an alarm filter. Seems that an infrastructure manager is a little bit crashing. So let's create a new alarm, but I'm doing it off screen by using the command line tool, which is called Nim Alarm. F5. So seems that the system is slow today. This should not be happening. But I do know the reason for this is because the infrastructure manager is not installed on the server itself. It is installed locally, and then it can be that it all of a sudden lost the connection completely, and then the only thing to do is restart it completely.
While you're doing that, I am keeping an eye on the Q&A, but feel free, anyone on the line, to ask a question via the Q&A. We'll keep an eye on that, as well as feel free, if you want to ask an audio question, you can use #6 or #6 on your phone, and we'll look for your question.
And here is my infrastructure manager back. Hey, where are you? And there we are again. So here we have our test message. And just clearing out everything. So let's take this alarm then. I'm going to read it. Average sample of disk free is now 15%. So we go to the ticket center. Here's our test alarm I just created. And here is the older alarm. And if we now go to the workload, to the activity history, let's trigger a new one now. The easiest way to trigger a new alarm is to restart the probe where the alarm is coming from. Why is this not working? That's odd. It has increased my count to 4 already, but I'm not seeing it in the ticket yet.
You want to just show those fields and where it should be? So we can just move on from onto the next point.
That's what I was looking for.
So just to validate, so for 2 here means that this alarm has been sent over to CSM 2 times. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks.
But normally you do have a workload entry, which is enabled, and that's a bit odd.
And certainly the benefit of that is not getting a flood of tickets in for one alarm on a server, and you can just have that
Indeed.
one ticket to manage.
And that is the reason why we are using alarms, because if you see, I just started an Oracle probe, and you can see the number of alarms which has been generated. So it is always, question checking of which came first. Is an alarm reportable? Is it, notable? Do we even need the alarm? Because most of the information from the Oracle alarms can be ignored. There is a workload. As you can see, they are now coming in because the nest has finished restarting. So if I now should enable the Oracle probe back once more, and be a little bit patient until it has been assigned a port and a PID. There it is. It's busy. So that's about it for the demonstration. Any other questions?
Any other questions on the Q&A right now? I don't know if there's any questions on the phone, and again, anyone can unmute their line with a #6, #6, and ask an audio question. Okay, I don't see anything else right now. Let me just check one more time. I lost my Q&A window. Sandeep or Prasanna, any other questions on your side?
No, Rich. Okay.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Peter? Any other resources you want to point folks to before we wrap up?
There is one good article on the community site which describes everything I just said. So it is already available for reference on, I think there is even a document created for it on how to set up the NFV gateway probe.
Okay. I'll make sure when I did post the presentation, but I'll also put a comment or a reference to that other document. We will be posting the recording to this in about probably 48 hours. Usually takes a little time to download and do all that, but so look on the community for that as well as lots of other good information. Well, thank you, Peter. I really do appreciate your time, and thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll see you soon for another Deep Dive webcast. Thanks, everyone.